What is your advice for assessment reform in today's higher education landscape?
I think we're at a very exciting and challenging stage with generative AI being with us. So I think we have to look critically at assessment design. I think we need to put more priority on process as well as product. Learning process has always been highly important, but under generative AI, we want to see evidence of staged assessment. So I think we want to be able to identify the kind of thinking and the kind of drafting and redrafting and the kind of process approaches to assessment. I think secondly, we want students to feel empowered by assessment so that they have an opportunity to showcase their best talents, to produce something that is meaningful and authentic to them, and something that is meaningful for professional identity or for the future workplace, or is developing the kind of skills that a university aspires to. So I think we want assessments that will inspire students and enable them to demonstrate critical thinking and judgment and communication skills. And maybe thirdly, perhaps its interactive oral assessment could be a part of our assessment designs, because I think oral assessment, oral communication is very important. And I think oral assessment can be more engaging for students and staff. And I think there's probably less likelihood of oral assessment being manufactured by generative AI, although that is possible. But I think that when students communicate orally, they are generally producing something that they have produced themselves. So I think those would be some of the many considerations in the assessment space.
Yeah, that's great. Some really good advice there and some really different ideas around how we can approach assessment for sure. So can you tell us a little bit then, how does feedback literacy fit into those ideas around assessment?
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. So feedback literacy is the skills or capacities that students and teachers need to make the most of feedback opportunities of different forms. So I think there are various ways we can develop feedback literacy together with students. And I think one of the most critical dimensions of feedback is the uptake. Unfortunately, the way higher education is structured is that there are often assessments at the end of the course, the end of the unit, at the end of the semester, trimester. So I think there's a challenge to kind of flip the feedback in a sense, to develop more iterative cycles of guidance within a teaching cycle. And at the end of the course, maybe we need to make a distinction between feedback and marking. I think at the end of the course, it's kind of marking and grading. So my argument would be that feedback is only meaningful when it's put into use. So I think that links us back to assessment design. And I think assessment design can facilitate feedback. And feedback design is important to design cycles of peer feedback, self-assessment, self-feedback, feedback from generative AI, feedback on work in progress that can actually enable students to enhance their work. So I think feedback for student uptake would be very much a key dimension of feedback literacy and a feedback agenda.
Yeah, that sounds like it'd be really useful. So do you have a couple of pieces of advice or considerations that we could, give to educators around assessment and feedback?
Yeah, I think in the assessment space, choice and flexibility are important, inclusiveness, facilitating the opportunity for students to produce something meaningful to them. And then I'm quite a believer in students as partners ideas, trying to co-create meaningful assessments together. Because I think if students have been part of a co-creation and negotiation of assessment, it becomes more meaningful to them and more valuable to them. And then in the feedback space, I think we try to develop more active feedback seekers, feedback generators. I think if we can have some possibilities for students to set an agenda for feedback, what feedback they feel they need, what feedback they feel they want, when it can be timed. And I think we also need to try and develop a culture where students are evidencing their action on feedback. So at the beginning of an assignment, they might write, well, the previous time I did this kind of assignment, the kind of commentary I got from teachers and peers was X, Y, Z, and now what I'm trying to improve is ABC. So trying to develop a culture where students are active in generating feedback for themselves and others, seeking feedback from peers and others, seeking feedback from sources such as the materials in the environment, generative AI, etc. And then most fundamentally, a culture where students are feedback users, that they're actually collecting valuable insights that they can use to enhance their work in progress and to improve their learning and their performance.
Yeah, I really like the inclusion of student agency, which comes across in your response there. Yeah, absolutely. That would be really powerful. Thank you very much for your time,
Thank
David.
you.
Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, my pleasure.